This episode is sponsored by Packs, the gold standard in emergency response bags. So when you're working under pressure, you need kit to be both dependable, tough and intuitive, and that's exactly what you get with Packs. Every bag is handcrafted by expert tailors who understand the demands of personal care. From the high-tech, skin-friendly and environmentally responsible materials to the cutting-edge welding process that reduces seams and makes cleaning easier. Packs absolutely puts performance first. They've partnered with 3M to make perfect reflective surfaces for better visibility, and bright grey interior makes finding kit effortless and fast even in low light. With over 200 designs, Packs bags are made to suit your role, your needs and your environment. And thanks to their modular system, many bags work seamlessly together no matter the setup. Packs doesn't chase trends, their designs stay consistent, so once you know one, you know them all. And if your bag ever takes a beating, their in-house repair team will bring it back to life. Packs are built to perform, made to last. Learn more at packs/bags.com or head to the show notes for further details.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.
Welcome back to the podcast. This is blog 2. I'm here with the author, Ryan Atkinson, of his fantastic blogs that he's published. And today we're going to dig into climate hypocrisy and carbon democracy, Ryan's blog that he put out a couple of years ago. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Hi, Aaron. Great to be back again.
It's great to have you with us, actually. So, Ryan, this blog, just to frame it, really spoke to some of the individual and indeed larger structural changes and the greater purpose that they serve to really increase debate, just increase that debate, just get and in a way drop preconceived ideas about carbon and indeed the climate crisis. Could I get you to really speak to why you wrote the blog in the first place?
Yeah, so this blog came out of a lot of conversations I was having at the time, both with colleagues within the wildlife and television industry and a charity that I was doing only a very small amount of work with at the time called Protect Our Winters UK, around the conversations that we have about climate change. And around the time I wrote this, Greta Thunberg was very much in the news, and the climate crisis, the climate emergency was becoming a lot more part of our national discourse. And most of my friends are on the same page as me regarding all of that, but you'd always encounter people that would say, oh, well, hey, how can you sit here talking to me about the issues around climate change when you fly around the world, 40 times a year and take helicopter trips into remote places in the Arctic and all of that. And it really triggered a lot of introspection, I think, around the justification of what I was doing at the time and how I could not shy away from those conversations, but really have an answer to people that would challenge me on that. There's this term that I mentioned in the blog called flight shaming, which I think is a really good center point really for this conversation. That classic, oh, you're sitting here in a high-vis vest blocking a road because of petrol cars, but you get on a flight to go on holiday or whatever. And I've only ever really traveled short haul for holidays, but I was doing a lot of long haul flights around the world. But I think I dislike that argument. But the way to deal with it is not to shy away from it. You've got to have an answer to it. You've got to tackle it head on. And what I talk about in the blog, is that we're all constrained by the systems and the structures, that the carbon democracy, for lack of a better phrase, that we live in, and you can't shy away from these difficult conversations. And sometimes that means that you have to hold your hands up and say, yes, I am having an impact. I am probably having a bigger impact than your average person upon the amount of carbon that we're putting out into the atmosphere, upon some of the social and environmental issues that are around the world. But actually, the purpose behind which I was doing that, to communicate these stories, to raise awareness, is vital, because the day we stop talking about that is the day that we stop caring about it, and the day that we lose the fight, right? And actually, if the only way to tell these stories is to fly to the other side of the world, get 2 boats, a helicopter and a fixed-wing aircraft into the remote Arctic, then so be it. I'd prefer if it wasn't. And I do far less of that now, and the industry does far less of that now. They work a lot more with local people and upskilling local people to tell their own stories and whatnot. But certainly at the time, like that was the world we lived in. That was the structure. That was the way things worked. And that to me is not a reason to stop the conversation. When someone turns around and says, well, you're having such a negative impact, how can you talk about this? All that serves to do is make the problem personal, which is an effort to shut it down, right? And it's not a personal problem. We can all play our own small role in tackling whether it's the climate emergency or any other number of national and international issues. We can all play a personal role in tackling it, but actually, it's the systemic factors and the structures within which we live which need to change, and they can only change if we keep talking, if we keep the conversation going. That's really what this blog was about to me.
Yeah, indeed, indeed, and it's interesting because, as you said, it's about opening up any preconceived ideas to really listen, actually, to the other side, and actually at the time, even Ryan, I'm sure you had some answers which were indeed, look, the expose or the what we're doing by filming endangered species or endangered wildlife is actually bringing recognition and hopefully more focus to some of the climate crisis, in the second or tertiary impact of that, both from the filming and otherwise. Just really quickly before we hear the blog, Ryan, did you receive any feedback on the blog? Was there indeed any anecdotal feedback or otherwise, just for people really resonating with your words?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had quite a few emails, texts from friends, from colleagues afterwards, basically saying, "Look, how do I talk about this? You know, when I'm at Christmas with my grandma, who doesn't understand the first thing about this for understandable reasons, you know, they grew up in a different era. How do I have these conversations? Because they are really difficult, challenging conversations to have." And so it was a real privilege that I was able to go, look, I am not an expert in this. I've done uh, various levels of carbon literacy training around communication on these issues, but to be able to point friends at resources and do my little bit to equip them to how to hold this discourse in a good manner and a respectful manner, and how to have these challenging conversations, tackle the issues head on without making it personal, which serves no one, really. It doesn't help either side of the argument. And really, it's breaking down that boundary about sides. And actually, this is such a vast and nuanced topic, as are many of the sort of emergent topics that we're facing at the moment. But to be able to chat to friends, to colleagues, and do my little bit to kind of guide, don't know if guide is the right word, but to give some prompts, to equip, to signpost resources for how to do nuance well was a real privilege, really. And something I guess I didn't see coming from the blog. I kind of wrote it just, I don't know if it was from a place of rage at being challenged about this stuff or what, really. It was a long time ago, but that was an aspect of publishing it that I didn't see coming. That was a real privilege to have those conversations.
So you're just about to hear the blog. It's a fantastic piece, transcribed into AI audio. And to Ryan's point, it's really about nuance and education and going deeper on the subject. Ryan, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's truly unpack this. Have you ever felt that unmistakable knot in your stomach, that little jolt of internal conflict, when someone, or maybe even just your own conscience, points out that you're, well, not quite living up to your environmental ideals?
Oh, absolutely. It's a feeling that I think resonates really deeply for so many of us in the whole climate conversation.
Right. Maybe you're, meticulously separating every single piece of recycling, composting your food waste like it's a religion. But then you still find yourself booking a flight across continents to see family you cherish, or maybe jetting off for that really needed vacation.
Or you're passionate, you're vocal about sustainable living, trying so hard to minimize your personal footprint. And then, yeah, you look down at your smartphone.
Exactly. The phone that's essential for pretty much everything, connecting, working, learning, and you get hit with that stark realization. It was almost certainly made in a factory, probably using significant fossil fuels, its parts sourced through these incredibly complex, often really carbon-intensive global supply chains.
It's just everywhere, isn't it, that feeling?
Yeah. It really is. This internal monologue, or sometimes an external accusation of climate hypocrisy, it's such a potent label and honestly often really debilitating. But what if that feeling, that accusation, is actually, well, a trap? What if it's a distraction, something that stops us from really making a difference?
That's a provocative thought.
Well, today we are embarking on a deep dive, a really fascinating discussion, I think, that not only challenges the whole idea of climate hypocrisy itself, but also explores a kind of liberating path forward. It shows us how we can genuinely move past this paralysis to make a real, tangible, and, profound difference in the face of this urgent climate emergency.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's our guide here?
Our guide today is a truly compelling article. It's titled, Let's Talk About Climate Hypocrisy and Carbon Democracy. It was written by Ryan Atkinson, published back in March 2020.
Ryan Atkinson, the filmmaker.
That's the one. And this isn't some, dry academic paper. It's an incredibly insightful piece from someone right there on the front lines. He's a dedicated filmmaker, spending his life documenting wildlife conservation and critical climate change science.
And ironically, probably facing those hypocrisy accusations himself all the time, given his work involves travel.
Precisely. He confronts these very accusations on a deeply personal level, which gives his perspective real weight.
So what's our mission then for the listener?
Our mission today, for you listening, is to meticulously extract the most potent and frankly transformative insights from Atkinson's unique and very pragmatic perspective. We want to arm you with the intellectual tools, maybe the confidence, to navigate these tricky, often really emotionally charged conversations.
And maybe feel a bit less guilty, perhaps?
Hopefully. And ultimately to empower you to think fundamentally differently about your individual role and maybe our collective role in addressing the climate emergency. We're going to show you how to engage effectively, decisively, moving beyond that debilitating perfect or failure paralysis that keeps so many well-meaning people from taking meaningful action.
What's truly fascinating here, and quite liberating, as you said, is how Atkinson takes what so many people see as this deeply personal flaw, right? A moral failing, this nagging idea of individual hypocrisy, and he just brilliantly reframes it.
How so?
Well, he transforms it from just a source of guilt into a critical and I think often profoundly misunderstood point for much broader societal change. It's not simply about defending our own individual actions or trying to justify our choices. It's about understanding the much larger, pervasive, and frankly, systemic implications these accusations have for the entire climate movement itself.
So it's bigger than just me feeling bad about flying.
Exactly. And it raises this absolutely fundamental question right from the start for all of us. Can we genuinely, reasonably expect absolute perfection, this sort of pristine, untainted purity from individuals who are, let's face it, by necessity living, working, and operating within a global system, a system that is still fundamentally designed around, deeply dependent on, and overwhelmingly powered by fossil fuels?
Right. As Atkinson puts it, we're immersed in this deeply embedded carbon economy.
We are. And attempting to escape it completely, to fully disengage, well, it's far more complex and often pretty much impossible than it first appears. It's like it's the water we're swimming in, whether we like it or not.
The accusation of climate hypocrisy, a deep dive into its nature.
Okay, so to really get into the core of this, Atkinson's article doesn't kick off with abstract theory. It opens with a really powerful, incredibly relatable personal anecdote from him, from Ryan Atkinson.
Grounding it in experience.
Yeah.
Exactly. He paints this vivid picture. He's a filmmaker, right? And his work demands he flies all over the world, often to incredibly remote, diverse locations. Think vast, untouched wildernesses or fragile ecosystems literally on the brink.
Places most people only see because of films like his.
Precisely. And his goal, to make these powerful films focused on wildlife conservation, highlighting ecological risks, and getting crucial climate change science out to a global audience.
Vital work.
Absolutely vital. And yet, guess what? Despite dedicating his entire professional life to these causes, he's constantly hit with the same argument, the same kind of barbed accusation, that his actions, specifically his frequent and necessary air travel, they just don't align with his professed beliefs about protecting the planet.
Yeah, the classic flight shaming.
That's the very essence sense of it. A very public and often, I think, aggressively personal form of criticism.
Definitely not. And it's relatable, unfortunately.
It really is. And many of us, maybe in different forms, have probably found ourselves in a similar kind of crossfire. Perhaps you've faced it directly, or maybe you've even, made similar accusations towards others, or most likely just had that internal dialogue kind of gnawing at you.
Like the organic food example.
Yeah, consider this. You might diligently buy organic produce, maybe go out of your way to support local farmers, reduce food miles, but then you still find yourself driving a gas-powered car every single day.
Out of necessity, often.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because public transport just isn't a viable option for your commute or your family's needs. Or maybe you passionately advocate for plant-based diets, trying to shrink your footprint, but you still occasionally enjoy those, let's be honest, exotic fruits like avocados or pineapples.
That have traveled thousands of miles to get to your plate. Yeah.
These aren't just minor things for some people. They feel like relentless gotcha moments. It's like this constant, often exhausting internal or external audit of our environmental credentials.
Where any perceived inconsistency, any tiny deviation from some imagined perfect standard gets immediately highlighted.
And used as this potent point of criticism, almost designed to invalidate all your other efforts. It leaves you feeling like you can't possibly speak out unless you are somehow completely beyond reproach. It's silencing.
It really is. And if we connect this to the broader picture, Atkinson provides a really incisive and, I'd almost say, revolutionary analysis of these criticisms. He argues that hypocrisy criticism is, at its core, much more than just pointing out an inconsistency.
Okay.
Its primary purpose, he suggests, and this is a direct quote, is to denigrate the individual by directing the criticism at the person rather than the problem.
Denigrate the individual rather than the problem. That's powerful.
Isn't it? And think about that for a moment. This isn't just a casual observation he's making. It's a profound strategic analysis of how these critical, incredibly important debates about climate action often get completely sidetracked, derailed, and ultimately just silenced.
So the focus gets shifted.
Unfairly, and he argues, deliberately shifted. Away from the actual urgent environmental challenge we face towards the perceived moral failings, the personal purity test of the individual who is actively trying to address that challenge. It's a classic rhetorical tactic, really divert attention from the substance.
Okay, I see that.
And he emphasizes this further. He says these types of criticisms truly serve one purpose: shutting down the debate.
Wow. Just shut it down.
It's a powerful, maybe even chilling statement, because it suggests the underlying goal isn't genuine progress, it's not constructive dialogue, it's certainly not finding solutions together.
So what is the goal then?
Silence. And ultimately, inaction. By focusing laser-like on individual imperfections, by endlessly pointing out perceived contradictions, the accusers effectively silence those who are actively working for change. They discredit the message, and by extension, they discredit the very cause they represent.
That's quite a negative impact.
It's devastating. And the consequence of this, he argues with real conviction, is it leaves people with only two stark, incredibly unhelpful choices. You're either perfect or you're a failure.
That black and white thinking.
Exactly. And it isn't just a dilemma, it's a profoundly false dilemma. It's a logical fallacy, and it's insidious. It doesn't just stifle genuine engagement, it paralyzes potential advocates. It makes them feel that unless they can achieve some unattainable level of pristine purity, unless they can live a life completely untouched by the carbon economy,
their efforts are worthless.
Precisely. Yeah. Their efforts are utterly worthless. Their voice is invalid. It's a mental and emotional trap that prevents countless well-meaning people from even starting down the path of action. 2, deconstructing the scale and impact of hypocritical actions.
Okay, so this is where, for me, it gets really interesting and actually quite liberating. Atkinson encourages us to get some crucial perspective that's often missing, I think.
Perspective on what, specifically?
On the actual scale and the real impact of some of these so-called hypocritical actions that draw so much fire and generate so much personal guilt.
Right, like the flying example.
Exactly. He starts with the very thing that often targets him personally, the source of his own flight shaming, jet-fueled airplanes. He notes, and this is a key statistic, that Air travel accounts for roughly 2% of global CO2 emissions.
2%. Okay.
Now, you might initially hear that, and it's a very common, very human thought process to go, okay, well, 2% isn't nothing. That's still a significant chunk of global emissions.
And technically that's true. It's not zero.
Absolutely right. It's not nothing. It matters. But Atkinson's point isn't to just dismiss that 2% or say it's irrelevant. His deeper point, his challenge, is to question the simplistic, often quite misleading logic that suggests cutting off that 2% alone means win. Right.
As if it's the magic bullet.
Yeah, as if solving that one small piece of the puzzle inherently magically solves the entire much larger and infinitely more complex climate crisis. He wants us to look beyond the superficial math, beyond the immediate, easy target, and understand the deeper forces really at play. It's about proportion, and it's about strategic focus.
This really does raise a critical and often overlooked question, doesn't it? About the actual effectiveness of focusing exclusively on individual action, especially those actions that are highly visible and easily targeted, like flying, versus the much broader, arguably more impactful scope of systemic change.
So what's his argument there?
Atkinson argues that if we were to simply cut off that 2% of emissions from air travel, let's say, hypothetically, everyone just stopped flying tomorrow, the other 98% will fill the gap easily if that other 2% isn't trying at least to keep it in check.
Fill the gap easily. Say more about that.
It's a profoundly important point. What he's implying here is that isolating individual actions, even ones that seem significant like global air travel, risks completely ignoring the vast majority of emissions. Emissions driven by much larger, deeply entrenched structural forces within our economy and our society.
Like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon.
That's a great analogy. When there's a gaping hole in the hull, the system itself is designed to consume fossil fuels. It's designed to operate in a carbon-intensive way. Simply removing one small part of that demand doesn't fundamentally alter the system's overall capacity or its relentless drive for consumption.
It just flows around it.
It's a powerful current that will simply flow around minor obstacles if the underlying structure remains unchanged. The demand finds another way, or the same structures keep emitting regardless.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the communication aspect he mentions?
Right. He illustrates this profound paradox here, one that directly impacts advocates and communicators like himself. The cost he speaks of in terms of effective communication and the vital identification of the core issues is absolutely crucial.
How so?
Well, think about it. If the very people who are actively trying to raise awareness about global problems, dedicated individuals like Atkinson, a documentary filmmaker whose work literally involves showing us the impacts of climate change from remote corners of the globe.
Yeah.
If these messengers are effectively grounded, right, unable to travel, unable to connect with diverse audiences, unable to document these critical stories firsthand, then how does that essential message truly spread?
Good question.
How do we build global solidarity, foster empathy, share critical scientific understanding if the messengers are confined, silenced by the very purity test that claims to support the cause they're fighting for?
It's a catch-22.
It really is. And this reflects a core belief, an unwavering principle he seems to hold, that knowledge is most valuable when it's not just understood abstractly, but actively applied and widely disseminated.
And sometimes that requires using the system's tools.
Sometimes, perhaps even often, that requires engaging directly with the existing system, using its imperfect tools like airplanes to reach a broader audience, rather than completely retreating from it, and in doing so, losing the ability to influence. It's presented as a strategic calculation, not some kind of moral surrender. 3. The imperfection principle, embracing hypocrisy for greater impact.
Okay, so we've thoroughly explored how these personal attacks and the simplistic either-or solutions are, well, actually incredibly unhelpful and counterproductive when we're trying to tackle something as huge as the climate emergency.
Right. They create paralysis, not progress.
So if that's not the answer, then what is? This is where Atkinson pivots to what I found to be one of the most liberating and profoundly practical parts of his whole argument.
Okay, what's the core message?
He encapsulates his key message, really the central thesis of his argument, in that timeless, incredibly relevant, and just deeply resonant phrase, perfect is not the enemy of good.
Ah, the classic. Sounds simple, but...
It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? Like something we all kind of know. But what's the deeper resonance here, especially for someone feeling that crushing weight of climate expectations and the fear of being called out as a hypocrite?
Yeah, how does he apply it?
Well, he presents it not just as some convenient excuse for inaction or imperfection. He presents it as a powerful, pragmatic call to action. He's urging us to move forward, to contribute despite our perceived flaws, despite the imperfections of the system we're all living in.
So embracing the imperfection to enable action.
Exactly. And he applies this directly and I think quite courageously to himself. He owns his position with remarkable confidence and clarity. He states his own purpose, acknowledging his situation head on. He says, quote, "My hypocrisy in traveling the world is evident, but I do it as a member of an imperfect society with a purpose to communicate and affect change."
Wow, he just puts it out there. My hypocrisy is evident, but...
Right. He doesn't shy away from the label hypocrite. Instead, he consciously, almost strategically, embraces it. He sees his actions, even those that appear contradictory on the surface, not as some crippling flaw that invalidates his life's work, but rather as a necessary means to a vital end. It's a strategic way to achieve a much greater good, to fulfill a profound purpose, using the very tools and operating within the very imperfect world he inhabits.
So he's making a conscious choice to participate actively, to engage, even if it means navigating these really complex, often murky moral waters.
It seems so. It's about the bigger picture, the larger impact, rather than achieving some unattainable individual purity.
And this perspective, as you highlighted so well, it really is entirely about practical engagement and strategic influence, rather than some kind of purist's self-imposed withdrawal from the world.
Right. No monks on a mountaintop need here.
Exactly. Atkinson makes a profoundly insightful, almost revolutionary point when he asserts, quote, "No one can live a non-hypocritical life in a meaningful way."
Oof. Say that again. No one can live a non-hypocritical life in a meaningful way.
Think about that statement for a second. It's a real gut check, isn't it? It fundamentally challenges the very notion of achieving some sort of pristine moral purity, some absolute environmental innocence.
Especially when you consider
that we are all, by default, living and operating within what he accurately describes as an inherently carbon economy.
it's not just a system, it's the air we breathe, the infrastructure, the food, the screen you're looking at right now.
Exactly. So if true purity is inherently impossible in this deeply interwoven system, what does that actually mean for how we define effective action?
Good question. What does it mean?
Well, it implies that true, impactful change often requires direct interaction with and influence upon the very structures and systems one wishes to transform.
Rather than just standing apart from them?
Rather than a detached, pristine, and ultimately maybe powerless separation from them. To change the game, you kind of have to be on the field, right?
Okay, that makes sense. Does he give any examples?
He does, and it's a powerful one. To illustrate this complex, often counterintuitive idea, he offers a truly thought-provoking and historically resonant analogy. He invites us to consider the monumental figure of Nelson Mandela.
Ah, Mandela, okay.
He says, Mandela was highly critical of politicians, but became a politician. Was he a hypocrite? Maybe, maybe not. But we all know that in doing so, this allowed him to dismantle the legacy of apartheid and seek to mold a better future for all.
Wow, that really lands.
Doesn't it? This example masterfully illustrates that engaging with an imperfect, often corrupt, deeply flawed system, even if on the surface it appears to be a contradiction of one's initial stance or ideals, can, in fact, be the only viable path to achieving profound systemic transformation.
He didn't just lecture from the outside.
Exactly. Mandela didn't stand outside the political system and merely lecture. He bravely entered it. He engaged with its mechanisms, precisely so he could dismantle the old oppressive structures and rebuild something better.
So how does that connect back to Atkinson?
Well, this powerful analogy speaks directly to Atkinson's core idea, that removing yourself from the grid, from the arena of influence, as he puts it, means you'll never have an impact on it.
If you're not playing, you can't change the rules.
Something like that. It's a critical insight for anyone feeling paralyzed by the immense, often self-imposed pressure to be absolutely perfect. It suggests, with undeniable force, that purposeful action, however imperfect its execution within a flawed system, is always infinitely more valuable and effective than inaction driven by the fear of criticism or the pursuit of some unattainable ideal. It's really a call to courageously lean into the messiness of real-world change. 4. From personal blame to systemic change, understanding carbon democracy.
Okay, so we've moved from the personal trap of hypocrisy, embracing the imperfection principle, understanding that engagement, not withdrawal, is key. But this isn't just about individual choices, right? It's much bigger.
Definitely feels bigger.
Atkinson then pushes us to consider the much larger picture, and this is where his perspective truly expands our understanding, I think. It shifts our gaze from the individual to the collective. He stresses, with absolute clarity, that the change required in tackling the climate emergency is both personal and systemic.
Both personal and systemic, not one or the other.
Exactly. It's not an either choice. It is, unequivocally, a crucial both-hand approach. We have to recognize that these different levels of action are inextricably intertwined and equally necessary.
You can't solve systemic problems with only personal actions.
Right, and personal actions don't exist in a vacuum either.
Got it.
So he highlights the pervasive, often invisible structural factors in the fabric of the carbon economy that we live in.
Those deep roots.
Yeah, and then introduces this truly fascinating and, frankly, quite powerful idea, one that resonates so deeply with our interconnected lives, our carbon democracy.
Carbon democracy. That's an interesting phrase. What does he mean by that?
It is intriguing, isn't it? It immediately makes you wonder, okay, what exactly does that mean? How does that term encapsulate our current global situation and the immense challenge that lies ahead of us? It hints at something far deeper than just, individual consumption patterns. Can you help us unpack what Atkinson means by this and why it's such a critical concept for understanding where our efforts should maybe be focused?
Yeah, let's absolutely unpack carbon democracy a bit more, because you're right. It's far more than just a clever phrase. It's a really profound diagnostic tool for understanding our current global predicament.
Okay.
Now, while Atkinson doesn't provide like a rigid dictionary definition, he uses it to imply a pervasive, intricate system where our societal choices, our established political structures, and our deeply embedded economic norms are not just intertwined with, but fundamentally dependent upon fossil fuels.
Dependent, that's key.
Absolutely key. Imagine our entire modern civilization as this vast, complex house. The very foundation of this house, the intricate plumbing system delivering resources, the expansive electrical grid powering every corner, almost all of it, is meticulously built upon and powered by carbon.
So our democracy operates within that house.
Precisely. Our democratic systems, in this context, how we vote, what policies get enacted, which industries thrive, how our cities are designed, how we move goods around the world, they've all evolved and been optimized within that carbon framework.
So when he talks about carbon democracy, it's the whole operating system.
He's talking about the very DNA of our societal operating system, the underlying architecture of how we live. It means that disconnecting isn't just about personal willpower or making ethical consumer choices. It's about changing the fundamental rules of the game.
Rules that are everywhere.
Rules that permeate everything, from urban planning and public infrastructure to international trade agreements and global finance. It's a system that dictates so much of our choices and shapes the very fabric of our collective existence.
Yeah.
It makes individual escape incredibly difficult, if not impossible sometimes.
Wow. Okay, so if we're living in this all-encompassing carbon democracy, what's the implication for us as individuals? It sounds kind of overwhelming.
Well, it is profound, but I actually think it's quite empowering once you grasp it. Atkinson argues that individuals must rise above the argument of hypocrisy to force systemic change, regardless of this perceived impact.
Rise above the hypocrisy argument to force systemic change.
Yeah. It's a powerful, urgent call to action. It's about channeling our precious energy away from self-flagellation, away from the endless, unproductive internal debates about personal purity and guilt.
Which gets us nowhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And instead directing that energy, that focus, that passion towards collective action. And this collective action should be specifically aimed at these deeper structural issues that define our carbon democracy.
So less beating ourselves up, more organizing.
In a way, yes. It's a powerful encouragement to think critically, to question our ingrained assumptions, and to consider different viewpoints that go far beyond just assigning personal blame. It's about seeing that your individual choices are part of this larger tapestry, and maybe your real power lies in influencing the loom itself, not just changing one thread you control.
I like that analogy, influencing the loom.
And he sees the insidious attempt to silence discourse, right? To shut down meaningful conversation through these relentless accusations of hypocrisy as a major debilitating barrier to any real progress.
But he offers a way around that.
He does, and here's the brilliant pivot. By embracing the hypocrisy, by acknowledging openly and without shame that we are all, to some extent, imperfect participants in this deeply carbon-dependent world.
Okay.
We can use that very acknowledgement as a powerful launch pad for conversations addressing climate change and our reliance on fossil fuels. the fundamentals of our carbon democracy.
So use the hypocrisy as a starting point for discussion.
Exactly. It's a revolutionary reframing. It transforms what is often perceived as a personal weakness, a moral flaw, into a strategic strength. It becomes a powerful tool for advocacy and education.
How does that work in practice?
It allows us to openly discuss the systemic nature of the challenge, to ask difficult questions about our collective dependence, without immediately getting stuck in the mud of personal attacks, judgment, and guilt. It opens the door to deeper understanding, shared responsibility, and ultimately collaborative solutions. It invites others into the conversation, rather than pushing them away because they feel judged or inadequate. V, continuing the conversation. Practical approaches to climate dialogue.
Okay, so if embracing imperfection, constantly focusing on systemic change, and deliberately reframing our dialogue is truly the most effective way forward, how do we actually translate this powerful philosophy into our daily lives?
Yeah, the practical side.
How do we keep that crucial dialogue open and constructive, especially when we're faced with those inevitable gotcha moments, the ones designed specifically to shut us down? It's one thing to understand the theory, but the practice, the lived experience, that can be incredibly challenging.
Absolutely. It's tough on the ground.
Atkinson, though, true to his pragmatic and impact-driven approach, states his own commitment clearly, and it feels like a potential blueprint for many of us. He says, "When there's a better alternative to air travel to achieve my purpose, I'll jump at it.
Okay, so openness to alternatives.
But until then, I'd rather contribute to the 2% of emissions if it enables me to at least try to do something about it."
Right. The imperfect action is better than no action.
It's a very clear, very impactful, and strategically sound approach, I think.
Okay.
It highlights a genuine willingness to adapt, to innovate, to improve as soon as viable alternatives emerge. But critically, it's a resolute refusal to allow the current lack of a perfect solution to prevent any action at all.
He's not waiting for utopia.
No, it's about being effective within the current constraints, leveraging what's available now rather than waiting, paralyzed, for some ideal non-existent world. He's choosing active, imperfect contribution with a clear purpose over passive, perfect withdrawal. It feels like a powerful lesson in practical environmentalism.
And that pragmatic stance naturally raises a really important question for you, the listener, right? How can we, as individuals, effectively contribute to this larger, crucial conversation and actively push for that systemic change he talks about?
Does the article offer any tips?
It does, wonderfully. The article itself provides some extremely useful resources for continuing the conversation, which offer a very practical, knowledge-based path forward, moving us from theory into actionable steps.
Like what?
For instance, he suggests that a key starting point is looking at the latest statistics and state of the climate.
Getting the facts straight.
Exactly. And this isn't just about doom and gloom statistics. It encourages us to engage in knowledge-based dialogue, grounding our discussions in objective facts and the most current scientific understanding helps move beyond purely emotional arguments or personal attacks.
So you can counter misinformation or simplistic arguments.
Precisely. For example, understanding that, say, the majority of emissions come from industrial processes or energy production, rather than just individual consumption, allows you to shift the conversation. You can move it from individual blame towards corporate and governmental responsibility. Knowing these facts gives you the authority and confidence to articulate the problem with clarity and precision.
Making your arguments stronger.
Much more robust and less susceptible to dismissal. It allows you to say, based on the latest IPCC report, here's what the science actually says about where the big levers are.
Okay, that's useful. What else?
Another incredibly powerful resource mentioned, and one that I find particularly insightful for both self-reflection and dialogue, is considering your carbon story.
Your carbon story, what does that entail?
It's not about shaming yourself, or anyone else for that matter. It's about cultivating a deeper self-awareness. It's about mapping out, in a constructive way, how your daily life, your commute, your food choices, your hobbies, the energy powering your home, the stuff you buy, how it all interacts, often unknowingly, with the larger carbon economy system.
So tracing your connections.
Yeah. For example, if you spend some time considering your carbon story and realize, wow, my primary carbon footprint comes from my daily commute in a single occupancy vehicle, this understanding doesn't have to lead straight to guilt.
It could lead to action.
It could lead you to proactively explore carpooling options, investigate public transport routes you hadn't considered before, or maybe delve into the practicalities of getting an electric vehicle. If you discover your dietary choices are a major contributor, maybe you explore some new plant-based alternatives or try a meatless Monday challenge.
So it personalizes the action points.
Exactly. By understanding your unique carbon story, you move from this vague, debilitating guilt to targeted, informed action. It helps you identify your personal leverage points within the larger system, and perhaps even more importantly, it shows you how you can then share that story with others.
Making it relatable.
This shared understanding can build empathy and collective action. It creates common ground for discussing solutions without judgment or needing everyone to be perfectly pure. It's a path to personal empowerment and also collective understanding.
Okay, that sounds really valuable. Is there a third resource?
Yes, finally, Atkinson points us towards Tips for Talking Climate. This offers concrete, actionable strategies for engaging constructively and effectively these often sensitive, often emotionally charged discussions.
Practical communication skills.
Exactly. And this aligns perfectly with the overarching idea of keeping dialogue open, keeping it productive, and actively reframing the discourse, just as Atkinson suggests. These tips might include things like practicing active listening, really hearing what the other person is saying, or finding common values instead of immediately jumping into debating facts or focusing on solutions rather than just dwelling on the problem.
Shifting the tone of the conversation.
Absolutely. The goal, ultimately, is to make the problem the systemic reliance on fossil fuels, the urgent need for structural and societal transformation personal and relatable to everyone without making the blame personal.
Focus on the system, not just the individual's flaws within it.
Precisely. It's about creating a shared sense of responsibility for changing the system, rather than tearing individuals down for their perceived inconsistencies within it. By approaching these conversations with these kinds of tools, we can move beyond simply exchanging accusations and start building common ground, fostering collective action, and genuinely working towards the systemic change that moves us all forward. It's really about finding a way to talk that invites people in, rather than alienating them.
Wow. What an incredibly insightful deep dive this has been, really. We've journeyed from those frustrating, often paralyzing accusations of climate hypocrisy to a truly powerful and, I think, empowering understanding of how embracing imperfection, relentlessly focusing our efforts on systemic change, and deliberately keeping dialogue open and constructive can actually make us far more effective, more resilient advocates for our planet.
It shifts the focus dramatically.
It really does. We learned that the ultimate goal in this complex, interconnected world isn't really to be perfect, which is often an unattainable standard anyway, in a system not designed for it, but rather to be truly purposeful within the intricate carbon democracy we all inhabit. Your participation, your voice, your intentional actions, they matter deeply, even if they aren't flawless.
Purpose over purity.
That's a great way to put it. Purpose over purity. So the next time you hear that familiar criticism, whether it's directed at you or maybe at a friend or an advocate you admire, or if you feel that internal conflict about your own choices and you start wondering if you're doing enough, remember Atkinson's profound and liberating message. Your impact isn't defined by personal purity. That's often an impossible and ultimately disempowering standard. No, your impact is defined by your unwavering willingness to engage, to contribute, and to push for change, even when your individual actions are imperfect.
Keep showing up, essentially.
Keep showing up. You are living in a complex, carbon-dependent system, and your conscious, purposeful actions, when aimed at that greater good, contribute meaningfully and critically to the larger collective effort to shift that very system towards a more sustainable future. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good, or even great, as you said.
And this deep dive truly raises an important, maybe ongoing question for you, our listener, to ponder and carry forward into your own life and conversations.
What's that final thought?
In what specific ways might your own perceived hypocrisies, those actions you might feel conflicted about, those areas where your ideals perhaps clash with your daily reality, in what ways might those actually be powerful opportunities?
Opportunities, how?
Opportunities to start a more meaningful, more open, and ultimately more constructive conversation about the systemic challenges of our carbon-dependent world. Consider how your everyday choices, even those you might feel a pang of guilt over, can become powerful launchpads for advocating for the structural changes we truly need.
Instead of reasons to stay silent.
Exactly. Rather than becoming reasons for withdrawal, for silence, or for that paralyzing inaction. Remember, there's always more to learn, and engaging with multiple perspectives will always enrich your understanding. So keep these crucial conversations going. Maybe explore your own unique carbon story and use your voice, imperfect as it might feel sometimes, to advocate for the kind of systemic change that moves us decisively beyond individual blame and towards collective, impactful, and really urgent action.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.